Okay, so hello. Can you introduce yourselves, please?
Hello there, Brean Duda, one of the course directors on the summer pre-sessional and also involved in the Biomedical students course for the last 4 or 5 years. And I'm here with my colleague.
I'm Bill Guariento, and I was the course director for the engineers, but I also came in and worked with the biomed students during the course Brean has just mentioned.
Okay, thank you. So can you tell us what the task was about?
Yeah, the task was for students at the Islamic University of Gaza to co-research with 2 or 3 students here in Glasgow, at the University of Glasgow, a medical issue, and then to write an individual report. The students in Gaza had to produce an individual report following academic conventions, referencing conventions, and with a 750 word limit.
Okay, and what was it that you were looking for in the report?
So there were 5 main things that we're looking for in the individual reports. The first thing was task fulfillment, their ability to answer the question, show clarity of ideas and develop their ideas at the same time. Then that led on to organisation. We're looking at their overall organisation from paragraph level, focusing on things like topic sentences, cohesion, signposting, etc. A big one then was the use of sources, so developing their writing using scholarly sources throughout and how they refer to these sources in text, and then producing a bibliography at the end, and then integrating the writing, integrating the reading through paraphrasing and summarising. So that was the third thing. Number 4 was their use of language, the nuts and bolts, in terms of the variety of sentences used, the accuracy of their grammar, and also the range and accuracy of their vocabulary, subject-specific vocabulary, so to speak. And the last thing then was we were focusing on the academic style in terms of hedging, their approach, using an objective approach to their writing, and using things like nominalisation, noun phrases, etc. But they were the five things that we were focusing on.
Okay, thank you. And you give individual feedback on every report, and now if you could just summarise maybe the strengths of the reports you have looked at.
Yeah, so shall I begin now?
Okay, Bill, yeah.
Well, firstly, my biggest overarching conclusion is that there was a lot of good subject knowledge from the students at IUG, and I learnt quite a lot in terms of content by reading these reports. I felt that the students also had a real enthusiasm for their subject. I mean, you could tell that it was something that they were doing because they felt that it was important and interesting, and that made it a pleasure to read. Lots of good subject knowledge. It was communicative. All of the reports were communicated the ideas well, I felt. Even I mean, we'll see in a minute that the grammar wasn't always perfect, but I got the general feeling that I could always understand what the writers were trying to say.
Yeah, I would second that. I would say that they were very effective summaries and demonstrated a good depth of subject knowledge and engaged the reader from the word go. Mm-hmm. I think most of them were set out with nice, clear intros and a good overall structure, which kind of kept the reader kind of engaged throughout. I was impressed with the overall, the understanding of the structure that most of the students had. So that was one thing that was pretty strong, and there were some, the lexical range was pretty impressive. And it's not that you could say you'd expect that, but it was impressive. And generally, the vocabulary was used quite accurately.
Yeah.
Does that refer to medical vocabulary or general academic vocabulary as well?
I would say both, but the subject-specific medical vocab. Yeah. And there were times too when some of that vocab was clearly nicely defined for the non-expert reader. So the audience, a lot of the writers they're keeping the audience in mind as well.
Yeah, because we're not experts in terms of biomedicine. We have a little bit of experience, but we're not experts. And I think that I agree with Brean that the writers had a good idea of the type of person they were aiming their reports at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so how about things that maybe could be improved and the students could work on in order to write better reports in the future?
Well, I was looking back at the reports this morning, and quite often there were comments about cohesion, that is the linking of ideas. And I don't know what you feel, whether it was a problem at a sentence level, but overall I would say cohesion probably in these reports needed more attention at the planning stage, because I agree with you that most of the reports were structured quite well, but some of them needed a clearer idea of moving in particular from the general to the specific. And if you sit down and plan your writing before you start writing, it can really help the reader and moving in particular from the general to the specific, and it helps with the paragraphing as well, because you find that each idea that you put down often tends to become a paragraph, and some of the students, some of the reviews maybe needed a little bit more attention to paragraphing.
True. I suppose the overall coherence, like how the ideas hung together, was strong, because that's their field, experts there. But yeah, as Bill said, at times the cohesion with the language kind of hung together. There were examples of where maybe like fragmented sentences, or where paragraphs may not have run in as smoothly.
When they weren't divided. Logically.
But overall, you could, as a reader, you could kind of grasp what has been said.
So talking about coherence and cohesion, what advice would you give to the students so that they can work on that on their own? I mean, apart from, let's say, paying more attention to planning, what else could they do to improve?
I suppose familiarising themselves with the genre of these kind of summary report writing. It may be new to a lot of students, so it's understandable that they may not be perfect, but just familiarise themselves, reading more of these kind of summary reports in English, and seeing exactly how how they're structured and how the ideas and the language kind of hang together. Something I would say.
Any other tips that come to your mind?
Well, I mean, if you're getting down to sentence level, then there were issues of grammar, and then I feel that some of the students, some of the reports could have worked more at sentence level on sentence structure, specifically making sure that each sentence has a subject and a verb, for example, and not two verbs.
Can you give an example of what you mean?
I can't remember any particular reports any specific reports, but there were cases when the students needed to be a little bit to do some careful editing to make sure that they can identify the subject, they can identify one verb. There's not more than one verb in the sentence.
Yeah. And maybe expanding back out to the bigger picture, like taking it more of a discourse view of their writing. If we were to compare their most students were using, and most writers were using conjunctions quite cleverly and aptly, at sentence level, but moving out to maybe the conjuncts where you're linking your paragraphs, I think a more overall, like linking the writing at a discourse level, a little bit more work there. So you can see the structure developing. Yeah. And I suppose that boils down to whether or not students were inclined to describe as opposed to analyse. There were not issues, but there were times when it was coming across with a description as opposed to an analysis.
I think that again is probably a planning issue, because if you lay out your main points in key words before you start writing, you're probably going to see that it is descriptive, or that analysis is lacking. So, I mean, I'll come back to what I said first, and I do think that planning was the main thing that I would suggest the students should focus on.
And do you think that was maybe a timing, lack of time, or?
I don't know. I really don't know how much time the students had to do this. I know they were kindly doing it during their holidays in Gaza, but that's not to say.
Or awareness, maybe. Yeah.
Maybe it's
process,
more awareness of the importance of thinking before you pick the pen up to actually do your writing. Doing a bulleted keyword plan is really quite useful.
I mean, the task was quite challenging, because within the word limit, I mean, there are probably limits to how much analysis you can do.
And all of the students stuck to the word limit. That was impressive. Yeah, that was good.
And everything was there within that limit. Yeah.
Yeah, I was surprised, agreeably surprised, that the students were able to cover so much within quite a tight word limit. 750 words isn't much.
No.
Okay. Brean, you said earlier that one of the descriptors was the use of sources. So can you comment on the use of sources following the conventions, referencing conventions?
Yeah. Again, mixed. It was, if you look at the bibliographies provided, some of them were pretty meaty. Like a lot of good stuff there, but there were situations where somebody had a lengthy bibliography, but may not have been referring to those those sources in text. So I suppose my advice would be, if it's in the bibliography, you really need to be referring to it in the summary itself. Then some little issues with maybe material coming from the source and remaining very similar to the source itself. So maybe more work needed with paraphrasing and summarising skills. So that's something else that students could work on.
In occasionally, some of the bibliographies weren't organised alphabetically by family name, so that's something to pay attention to as well.
Yeah, but sometimes students have a tendency to, if they're not strong with in-text citations or referencing, they'll use quite a few direct quotations, and that didn't happen. So students did try their best to paraphrase and summarise, and they weren't kind of just falling back into just pulling chunks and putting it in direct quotations. But if a student is going to take like an important quote from somebody else's source, then they should be using the quotation marks.
You said there were a couple of examples of times when the students hadn't referred to the sources they listed in the bibliography weren't actually in the text, and I saw a couple of the opposite as well, when there were sources mentioned in text which weren't included in the bibliography. So obviously make sure they balance, basically.
So maybe again it's an issue of careful proofreading and just making sure that everything matches.
Editing is important.
Okay, thank you. So any last comments?
Yeah, I would just say, like, just jumping back to that previous point there, when you're trying to condense something into such a short word limit, it may have been that could have been the reason why some of these authors ended up not getting a mention in the summary itself. They could have been used, they could have been the end product. So that can easily happen, but just to be mindful that those things can happen. So back to your question now.
Well, for me, a final comment is, or a final point to bear in mind is there's the very small things about formatting which can really affect the reader. So, for example, you need to be consistent when you're writing with the spacing before and after full stops, and before and after commas. And usually you'll find that Word is helpful, and if you haven't got it right, it'll often highlight it with little green underlining, and you need to go back and fix those things. Again, it's an editing issue. So consistency with your spacing before and after full stops and commas is important. And I don't know if you had an issue when you were typing in your comments that the cursor was moving right to left.
Yeah, I did have that. Yeah,
which is obviously what happens in Arabic when you're writing. But it's difficult to give feedback with the cursor moving. It's possible, but it's difficult. So an interesting one. The site seems small, but these small things are quite important as well.
There's one more point I'd like to make, because the standard was very, very high, and in terms of within a summary itself, there were just some times when they just possibly lack of editing or lack of proofreading dropped the sophistication level of some parts. So you could have a very nice, accurate paragraph and then a slightly less accurate one. So in terms of just taking the time, consistency with the sophistication of your language, even get somebody else to have a little look at it, like a fresh set of eyes, just to quickly proofread it for you before you'd submit it. And there's nothing wrong with doing that.
But I mean, it was a pleasure to read these things. It was to think. I mean, many times I thought, "Whoa, I've learned something," and that meant that the writer had been able to convey his or her ideas to somebody who wasn't a subject-specific expert, and to keep my interest. I enjoyed reading it.
Same here, and I came in at the tail end of the process. Now, in previous years, I would have worked with students the whole way through, their extended essay or their extended summary or report, and I'd have worked with them for the 5 weeks. But I was just coming in towards the end and seeing these reports being generated, and I was thoroughly impressed. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like, where did that come from? It was good.
Yeah. I hope we can build on it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And do it again next year.
Absolutely. Hopefully.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.